Good afternoon. My name is Dr. James McAllister. I'm the Music Program Director at Lincoln Memorial University. We're here for our weekly Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences show. I'm hosting this week in lieu of Dr. Sellers, who's been called away on business. This afternoon, we're going to explore music and its role in American culture.
Now, support for this program is made possible by Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. Further information on academics, campus life, educational programs, admissions, and financial aid, and much more, www.lmunet.edu.
Great, thanks. It's wonderful to be here this afternoon. I'm very excited to be on the radio and talking about a lot of great cultural issues as well as musical issues as well. We have a couple of guests in studio. If you guys would take a second to introduce yourselves so we know who's here.
Hi, my name is Rachel Schott, and I am the Director of Candidate Recruitment and Student Success over in Avery Hall. And Avery Hall houses the Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences Department here at LMU.
Hello, my name is Alexandra Spangler, and I am an undergraduate English student here at Lincoln Memorial University. I'm also involved in the theater program.
Great.
Hello, my name is Daniel Baldwin, and I am a composer.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Baldwin, for being here this afternoon. It's nice to have you sort of on the phone with us.
My pleasure.
Terrific. Let me start off the program by talking a little bit about Lincoln Memorial University and its role here in Appalachian culture as well as kind of a regional sense. The university here is very committed to liberal arts education as well as professional education. You'll be very familiar, of course, with our School of Osteopathic Medicine, our veterinary school, our new law school, things like that. But we also have a very thriving liberal arts school as well that's housed in the Hamilton School of Fine Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. So we have lots of topics going on with that. And one of the things that we focus on these broadcasts are how these schools and programs kind of coalesce together. So the music program itself is a fairly integral part of what's going on. We have kind of lots going on in the music program this year. We have lots of things that are going on this semester, and one of the big things we're going to talk about today is a big premiere concert that's happening next week. Before we get into that topic, let's take a second and talk about the music program itself. Rachel, you've had a lot of experience kind of recruiting for the music program, and it seems kind of silly for me to ask you this question, but it's probably a good lead-in. What to your mind, what is the role of the music program here, and what does it kind of offer students, not only in terms of a music major, but students who are participating in various aspects of the music program?
Well, I think we're lucky that the music program here really has a strong effect on three different types of people. The community, which get an opportunity to come and see performances not only from our own ensembles but also from visiting ensembles all throughout the year. So the community is affected by the music program. Obviously, the students who are here as music majors get a really sort of a la carte experience in a small university where they have lots of attention with their faculty members. They get lots of experience in different kinds of ensembles. Being a smaller program, competition isn't as high as it is in large schools where only the very top get into the major ensembles. But then I think the third group most impacted by the music program on campus are the students who played in their high school orchestra, their high school band, sang in their high school choir, and loved it. And we all know those students. I was one of them where that was their thing. It was really all my friends were in music. So those students have a unique opportunity here because they can participate right alongside the music majors. And they also are rewarded for that financially. We offer $1,000 a semester for students who want to audition and continue their musical experience in our pep band, which is the Splitter Sound Machine, the jazz band, the choral ensemble.
And the concert band. Don't forget the concert band.
And I almost forgot the concert band. Sorry.
No worries. That's not a problem at all. I'm glad you mentioned the scholarships because that was really one of the next questions. And a lot of people ask me as a professor at this university, does my student have to be a music major to participate in ensembles and get scholarship for that? And the answer to that is a resounding no. We offer scholarships to folks all across the university, regardless of discipline. And all they have to do is perform a short audition for the music faculty to get into the ensembles and get the scholarship. So it's not a very arduous process at all. in terms of that. Rachel, could you talk a little bit about how the music program kind of impacts the kind of workings of the school? I think you have a unique perspective on this since you're the recruiter and somebody who kind of views the entire school as a from an entirety standpoint.
Sure, you mean the School of Arts and Humanities or
Yes.
the college at large?
I'm talking about the School of Arts and Humanities.
Well, everybody loves the music students, first off. They're the students that are the most, in my opinion, Alex notwithstanding, because she's been involved in our music program a lot, are very outgoing, and the students they perform a lot of service to the school too. They're often, asked to play at our events and that sort of thing. They're sort of our ambassadors. They are the arts and humanities, social science ambassadors to the rest of the university.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Alex, what you've been involved with the music program to a certain extent, singing, choir, and that type of thing. Could you kind of give us your English major perspective on what we're talking about?
We're listening for your grammar.
Well, honestly, as a student who's not a music major and involved in the musical programs, I really don't think that it makes that much of a difference what your field of study is. Anyone can enjoy being in a musical ensemble, singing, playing, what have you, whatever your niche is. I was also one of the students who was in band in high school. That was my sort of corner. And so when I came to Lincoln Memorial University, it was only common sense that I would continue that. And eventually I transitioned from playing in the concert band and pep band to joining the chorus, which I had never really done before in school. And it's been a very good experience. I received the scholarship, so that's actually what allows me to continue living on campus and staying connected. And honestly, as a student who's involved in the theater program as well, we work very closely with the music program. A lot of music students are involved in our productions. For instance, a couple of music majors were in our production of Alice in Wonderland last spring, and now that we are doing Fiddler on the Roof, the first musical that I participated in here, you, Dr. McAllister, you're helping us out with music, and we've been getting a lot of support from the music program in the theater department.
Yeah, that's a great plug for Fiddler on the Roof, so I appreciate that very much.
Of course.
I also appreciate your segue into theater, because one of the reasons that we're here today is to talk about some events that involve the theater program, and and part of the impetus for this particular program was the commissioning of a new work from Daniel Baldwin, who's online with us, and I'm going to talk here in a second about this concert that's coming up next week. We're going to be performing this piece that Dr. Baldwin wrote. There's actually about our former director of theater, Mark McKinley, and I'm going to want Alex your kind of chime in on that for a second. But let me tell you a little bit about the project and how that's kind of come to be. As many of you are aware, Mark McGinley, who was a beloved theater professor here for many years, passed away very suddenly last summer. And as being here myself for a year when it happened, I worked with Mark. I knew Mark to a certain extent, and it was a very personal tragedy for me and the students whom I talked to, and my colleagues in the faculty over there at the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And it really struck me how much of an influence and an impact he had on not only the cultural life of the school, but the social life of the school and the musical life, because he was a very energetic and very much a friend to the music program as well. And oftentimes when these kind of things happen, one of the ways that musicians react to that is to create music to commemorate somebody. So I sat down with Dr. Sellers probably in August and floated this idea of commissioning a piece for Mark, commissioning a piece that would honor our colleague, commission a piece that would honor our friend, and kind of cement his place in our culture here at Lincoln Memorial University. Dr. Sellers was very enthusiastic, and we started to work on the various aspects of that. Now, the first person I thought of as to who would compose this piece would be my friend, Dr. Daniel Baldwin. So it's been a very interesting journey as far as that goes, not without its pitfalls, because when you engage in this kind of project, there's always some type of things you kind of have to work through. So we're premiering this piece. It's called Flying. Dr. Baldwin has written it for our concert band, and we're going to be performing it next Wednesday evening at 7:30 p.m. in the Duke Hall Auditorium. This is a free concert that's open to the public, and I'm going to hope that a lot of you out there listening will come out and listen to this piece and join us for a brief moment of remembering our friend and colleague, and a brief moment of thinking about some things that are bigger than us, right? Which is to say some cultural things, some social things, some things that make us not only human, but make us kind of artistic as well. So I'm going to turn that over to Alex. And could you talk a little bit about Mark and talk to us a little bit about his personality, what he was like to work with, that kind of thing?
Oh, wow. Where do I even begin? Mark was the professor who drew me into the theater program, and so he'll always have a very special place in my memory, I think. I first met him when, in my sophomore year, when the LMU players were planning on performing Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. And the first time I met him, I was blown away. He was just so energetic, so lively, so passionate about what he was doing, what he was trying to create with all the students, and I was intrigued. I had never given a thought to theater before, but suddenly I wanted to know what this was all about. And so I auditioned. I was nervous as all get out. I had never done anything like this before. The only thing I knew about acting was how to maybe say things with a slight accent and pace across the stage back and forth in one small area. And I just remember him stopping me and saying, "That was good. Pacing can be a character choice. How about you try it again and stand still?" And so I did. And that was the defining interaction we had, and that defined how I would come to see him later, because he was one of the, if not the most supportive professors that I've ever known. Sorry. After that production, I took his Fundamentals of Acting class. I took a stage combat class with him, and oh wow, he was absolutely amazing to work with. He really made you stay grounded in the moment. That was just the effect he had on you. From the minute he walked in the room, you couldn't stay down in the dumps. It was impossible. He had a way of just drawing you into the world of the moment, the scene you were in, or even just the moment in life you were having, and just not letting you go. And So yes, I think that Mark had a very profound effect on how I saw things as well, not only as an actress, but also as a person. I remember he always used to say that it's our job as actors to people in the theater program to say the things that other people are afraid to. And so I believe that just thinking about that statement not only changed how I viewed the craft of acting, but also how I approached life. He literally burst me out of my shell, and I don't think, since being in the theater program, I've changed irrevocably. I don't think I'll ever be able to go back. So
we like you out of your shell.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was, oh wow. He was definitely disorganized to work with. I'm not going to gloss over that. But really, everything always seemed to come together, no matter how scattered everything was.
Sometimes out of chaos, we can gain great order.
Exactly.
It's very true. Well, I appreciate your input here, Alex, because it's important for us to understand that as musicians, we certainly have impact on audiences and our students, but it's also good for us to realize that outside of our area, people have great impact as well. So thanks so much for sharing your recollections with Mark. We're going to take a short break here in a moment. When we come back, we're going to dive into detail with Dr. Baldwin and get him involved in this conversation about composing, about music, and about how this project kind of came to fruition on his end.
91.3 The Gap, WLMU, Harrogate, Tennessee.
There is a jewel in the crown right here in our Cumberland Mountains, and it's the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum, located here on the historic campus of LMU. It houses one of the top 5 Lincoln and Civil War collections in the entire world, and it's right here in our own backyard, located here in Harrogate, Tennessee, at the main entrance of LMU's campus. For more information, their number is 423-869-6235 and on the World Wide Web at lmunet.edu/museum.
Good afternoon. You're on the air with the Hamilton School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. I'm Dr. James McAllister. I'm the music program director at the school. I'm filling in for Dr. Martin Sellers, who is not with us this afternoon. And today we're talking about music, its role in culture, its role in society, and we're talking about a commissioning project that I kind of concocted last summer, involving, of course, some of our theater students and, of course, our musicians and our special call-in guest, Dr. Daniel Baldwin. Daniel, welcome to the show. Would you take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself and where you live and what you're doing right now, that type of thing?
Absolutely. I am currently living in Nebraska. I finished my doctorate a couple of years ago, and I am working as a full-time composer.
A full-time composer? You mean that you sit around and write music all day for a living?
Pretty much. I have a couple of very small part-time teaching gigs, approximately, I would say, about 4 or 5 hours a week. I teach, but otherwise, my entire living comes from writing music.
Okay, well, I'm a little confused because it seems to me that composers are old dead white guys who wear powdered wigs and are pretty much busts, and they don't have arms and legs. So maybe you might want to talk about the role of a composer in the 21st century.
That's a great joke, and it never gets old. Yeah, unfortunately, we do have that unfortunate vision of what composers are, that they are all dead white guys. But we do, just as regular people, come in all shapes and colors, and some of the greatest composers writing music right now are all alive. So. The role of composers, of course, has changed a little bit from the time that people realize, like, for example, we think of Beethoven and Mozart and those kind of people. Now, music has transformed into something a little bit different. Now its role in society is far-reaching. We do everything from writing music for academic purposes all the way up to writing little jingles for commercials, writing background music for elevators, anything and everything that you can think of. There's almost no place that you can go where you don't hear some music of some kind. It's a little bit more difficult to make a living, although I think I would probably get some argument from some of those dead composers if they were alive. But yeah, it's a fun time to be a composer. We in this day and age, we're not limited by constraints that some composers of the past have been limited to, but we write as much as we can, just as those people from the past did.
Sure. Could you take a second and tell us about your involvement with this commissioning project, this work that you've created called Flying, that I commissioned you to write in terms as a dedication to our colleague Mark McKinley. Would you just kind of tell us a little bit about your role and how you kind of attacked how you write music in commemoration of someone, which seems to be kind of an interesting task, if not a very difficult one?
It is. First of all, I would be remiss if I didn't pay my compliments. First of all, of course, you and I have been friends for quite a while now, and I'm, of course, very familiar with all of your various commissioning activities over the year, having commissioned composers from all over the world and premiered their pieces, and everything from pieces like this that are more advanced wind band pieces, all the way down to pretty selfless wind band pieces commissioned for beginning bands, even though that you're a college band director. So I want to pay my compliments to you again for that, but also to LMU. This is to commission a piece. I don't think that people sometimes understand that this is an expensive and it's a risky endeavor. As in creating a piece of art, you really don't know what you're going to get, and it's a very big school thing to do. And like for example, some wind ensembles that I've written music for the West Point Band. Most recently, like for example, composer David Garner most recently wrote a soprano saxophone concerto for Duke. Miami University is commissioning constantly. It's a very big school thing to do, so I'd like to compliment LMU for their vision in supporting you to do this. The piece, Flying, we of course had our discussion about this, and as I said before, in your selfless nature, you kind of left the details of the commission to myself and the theater students. So I had an opportunity to visit with a few of the theater students about Mark McGinley, and I got a little bit of information. I feel like I got a general idea of who he was through a few texts and a phone call. And what I seem to learn about Mark McGinley is, in general, that he was a pretty free spirit who, of course, enjoyed theater and drama, and interestingly enough, he also enjoyed fencing. And so I got that he was very energetic and things like that. So those were all things that I wanted to incorporate into the work. So I set out to try to find some kind of a program material that I can use. I went through several. I was pitched the Flying Dutchman at one point, and I thought that was interesting. Get the sword fighting in there and lots of drama, but ultimately it just seemed a little bit too dark of a vehicle to use for that. And if you're not familiar with the Flying Dutchman, it's of course the story of a ghost ship. But I did find the word flying to be really interesting. I kind of took it symbolically, envisioning Mark McGinley being the free spirit that he was, flying across a beautiful and ever-changing landscape, which would represent all the various theatrical and dramatic things that he did, or that he coached into creation, rescuing people, facing danger, and I even got a little sword fighting in there. But I just wanted to create a almost theatrical drama that would fit within what is appropriate to write for a wind band, but also just to honor his memory.
Sure. Yeah, I think you did a really good job of trying to capture Mark's spirit, and I think that really comes out in the work. We've been rehearsing it for several weeks now, and it's just every time that we rehearse through it, it seems to kind of get a little bit more, I would say a little bit more clear, a little bit more of character of the man, a little bit more very much about his life and about his work here at Lincoln Memorial University. Let me go back and talk about commissioning for a second, because it seems like you spent a lot of time being commissioned, and I think probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that's probably a large source of your income is through people commissioning you to write music. I have a kind of a pointed question here for you. As a composer, why do musicians commission pieces from composers when they're composers like yourself and me and others out there who are just simply writing music on their own? Why commission a composer to write a specific piece for a specific thing?
Well, that is a pointed question. There's all different kinds of things. Some people want to mark the occasion. Some people want to, as you said, kind of like in the situation that we're currently in, it would be to cement the legacy of someone that was cared about or that was important to a program or to another person. Sometimes it's for a specific event, or they want to mark the occasion in some way, and in some ways it's for their own legacy, to leave something behind. As sometimes we forget that all music was new at some point, there's all of the great music that we have right now. We consider, like for example, we consider Beethoven one of the greatest composers in our history. But at one point, Beethoven was 20 years old. And at one point, he was writing music that no one had heard. And someone had to be the first to play his works, to commission his works, and bring them into existence so we can have them now. And that's why that it's so important to continue to do that at this point. Because we have those composers in every century and in pretty much every generation, and you never know what piece or what composer is going to end up creating that spectacular piece that's going to stand the test of time.
Sure, I think you're absolutely right about that, and I like your characterization of all music at one point was new music, and we're very much entrenched in this notion that new music is perhaps a little weird, or perhaps a little on the edge, or perhaps a little bit not what we're used to. And it's important for us to remember that all music at one point was new, and all music at one point was fresh and radical to somebody. And you just have to look at Stravinsky to kind of figure that out as far as that goes. And one of the things that I really like about the fact that we're working on this project together is that we're bringing these issues to the forefront, and we're talking about what a composer is and what a composer does, and putting it into a modern 21st century context, because I was joking a little while ago when we think of composers as, guys who wear powder wigs, and that's kind of the preconception. But, they're composers
right
all over this country, writing music, writing new music, writing great music, and a lot of it doesn't get performed. A lot of it gets performed once and gets set on a shelf, and I think it's I would almost call it the duty of any musician who is leading an ensemble, or perhaps in a chamber ensemble, to commission and perform new music. And I think that you would probably agree with me on that.
Of course. Yeah, I agree completely.
Okay, great. Well, this is a great conversation. I'd like to hold you over, because we're going to take a short break here in a second. When we come back, we're going to continue with Dr. Baldwin. We're going to continue with our in-studio guests and talking about new music and composers and what it is that we do in the 21st century as far as musicians and other ensembles go.
.3 The Gap, WLMU, Harrogate, Tennessee.
Muddy Waters was the definition of the blues. You can hear artists like him and many more every Wednesday at 9 o'clock. Right here on Wednesday Evening Blues with your host, Gary Daniels. We're the Tri-State area's destination for the blues, 91.3 WLMU.
Oh, yeah.
Support for WLMU's broadcast and webcast is made possible in part by Lincoln Memorial University. To find out about educational opportunities, academics, campus life, athletics, admissions, and financial aid, you can visit their website, lmunet.edu. Lincoln Memorial University, supporting WLMU's broadcast and webcast around the globe and in the tri-state area.
Weekday mornings, over on our media partner, WCXZ AM 740, you can tune your radio dial to Amos in the Morning. Host Tom Amos presents news, interviews, insight, and a little music. That's Amos in the Morning, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, on WCXZ AM 740, and online at 74wcxz.com.
Every Monday through Friday at noon, you can catch Midday Classics hosted by me, the Magic City Madman, Tyler Rowlett. It's a full hour of classic music from all genres. You'll hear classic rock, funk, soul, R&B, and lots more. It's a soundtrack to your lunch hour every Monday through Friday at noon, right here on 91.3 WLMU.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. James McAllister, Music Program Director at Lincoln Memorial University. I'd like to welcome you to our weekly Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences show. I'm filling in for Dr. Martin Sellers. I'm sure he'll be back next week to regale you with all kinds of interesting tales about what's happening in the world of the Hamilton School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. We've got some guests in the studio today. We've got a guest on the phone, Dr. Daniel Baldwin, who's a composer, who's been talking to us about his piece that he commissioned, that the LMU Concert Band commissioned of Dr. Baldwin, called Flying, which is in memoriam of Mark McGinley. And before we left for break, we're talking about the role of new music and the role of commissioning and the role of these various activities that the musicians do that might seem a little questionable, perhaps, to non-musicians, to people who aren't around this type of music, and the notion that composers are important, and the notion that people in the 21st century actually write music, and that it's being performed on a fairly regular basis. So I appreciate everybody's insights into that. Dr. Baldwin will be here next week to work with the LMU Concert Band in preparation for this premiere concert. He's also going to take some time and work with our music majors and talk to them about composition and talk to them about opportunities in composition and that type of thing. I'm going to put Dr. Baldwin on the spot again and going to ask him another pointed question about the role of composers and students. And, Daniel, you've been on lots of different projects like this, going to various places and talking to students. What do composers get by interacting with a group, say, like the LMU Concert Band, who's commissioned them to write a piece?
Well, are you speaking in terms of what do I get, or what do the students get?
I think that's a great point. Let's start by talking about what you get from working with students and talking to them about all these different issues.
Well, for me personally, and you're right, again, that is a pointed question, because that's going to be answered differently from composer to composer. But for me, it's an opportunity to extend the message on to another generation. As composers, classical, quote-unquote classical musicians, and so on and so forth, we're always looking for ways to become relevant in today's society. And by being there and visiting with these students and showing them that living, breathing composers writing cool music can be hip and cool, not the broken hip, then it furthers our cause, and that's continue getting more and more, hopefully in the future, getting more and more support for our art.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to caution you, Dr. Baldwin, that I do the comedy shtick around here, so you want to be careful about the jokes. So, and let's the second point of that question, I think, is about students and student interaction with composers. And what do you feel that students get out of kind of this arrangement?
Oh, it's far-reaching. I'm not sure that I could cover it all in this. How long is your show? I can hit on a couple of things. First and foremost, they get the opportunity to discover that composers actually are alive, and that there are people still doing this for a career, and that this is something that they can potentially pursue in the future as well, and have some success at. They also get the experience of being a part of something that is larger than themselves, the commission of something new dedicated to someone else. So in essence, this is a collaboration not just between myself and Dr. McAllister and LMU. This is a collaboration between all of us and every student in the band and every student in the audience. And it's an opportunity for education for all of us as well.
Sure.
If I could jump in just real quickly, I was involved in my high school orchestra, and we didn't premiere a piece, but we did get to meet the composer and perform a piece conducted by the composer. And I will never forget the experience, because it was a co-creation in the truest sense, where I realized, what we brought to the table was respected by the composer as a worthy addition to the piece, not just a mediocre orchestra with our errors and everything else, but he really made it feel like our unique contribution to his piece was valuable. It was really a striking experience. I don't think I'll ever forget it.
Sure, I think that's a really valid point. It's important for us to remember as directors and composers that our involvement with students, having them involved with these kind of projects, sometimes is far-reaching, and we're not going to really understand what the impact of that is for years, until years later, when those students have a chance to digest and have a chance to kind of understand what it is that they were involved in. So I think it's a really good point that Rachel makes about the just the nature of student interaction with the composer, and just the notion that there's a sense of shall we say, intimacy between the people performing the work and having the composer right there, because for a very strong sense, you're performing a part of that composer. Because I think that, Daniel, you would agree with me that every composer pours a little bit of him or herself into any composition that they're creating.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And a lot of people, they have a view of what composers and composition is that is not absolutely accurate. And sometimes it would be easy to think about composers and compositions in regard to film.
Sure.
And theater acting. Like, for example, every movie that's written has to someone who has written it, and then every actor within that production or that film has to bring their own piece of themselves to the role, and it's through the collaboration of all of the people involved that brings that piece of theater or that movie to life. Composition is exactly the same thing. It's for music.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really valid point. I'm going to shift the conversation for a second and talk about the concept of new music, because we talked about this a little bit, and in the interest of being very very unbiased, I need to say that I am a composer as well, and I've written several pieces, and actually we're premiering a piece that I've written on this concert as well, a concertino for piano and winds that my colleague Dr. Young Kim is performing as the piano soloist on. And it seems to me that new music, and particularly new concert music, quote unquote, and I'm hesitant to use those terms because there's lots of baggage associated with concert music and art music versus popular music, and I'm not interested in unpacking those bags here this afternoon. I think that we've seen a seismic shift in the way that composers have thought about music, in a way that composers are now writing music in a much more, shall we say, what's the term I'm looking for? They're writing music that is much more accessible for audiences than they were, say, in the 1930s and the 1940s. And I think that we've seen the end of serialism, pretty much. I think we've also seen the end of this of these very strict tonal serialists who write music that sounds like it was mathematically created as opposed to created from the heart. And I'm wondering, Daniel, if you could take a minute and talk about your music and your compositional style, and tell us a little bit about how you view your music as opposed to how it kind of fits with, say, the music of Schoenberg or Webern or Berg or some of those mid-century giants that we both know.
Sure. I would say simply that my music is just such that I enjoy what I enjoy listening to from the audience. It has gone through a lot of variations, of course, but it is grounded in tonality and lyricism, and I like to write music that is listenable. I like to write music that has drama, that says something, that speaks to me. I always think that if my music will speak to me, then perhaps it'll speak to someone else. Again, like I said, it's going through a lot of variations. Like, for example, it's a great time to be a composer right now, because kind of all of the rules have been erased. There is no longer a rule book to follow. You can honestly almost do whatever that you want. We have people doing fusion pieces of including pop rock, some semblance of atonal serialism, everything that you can think of, neo-romantic, neoclassicism, and fusing all of those things together. I mean, I've even done some of that myself. Fusing 12-tone with jazz and rock. I've written a few things that could be considered pop music that were written for one band. I wrote a rock and roll bassoon concerto, a heavy metal piece for a low instrument with a guitar, pedal effects, and loop station. But I've also written things that are very, very neo-romantic and maybe even slightly cinematic in a way. I would say that no matter what I do, it seems to be the overall effect that it's grounded in some sort of tonality and lyricism.
Sure. Yeah, and I think you make a good point about it being a really great time to be a composer, because, as you said, there are really no more rules about how to write music, and there are really no more rules about how a new piece of quote-unquote concert music should sound. I think that
right.
We've evolved past those labels, so to speak, and it's interesting to me how these labels kind of get stuck on music that then defines what the music should do or how it should say. And I really like your example of the rock and roll bassoon concerto, which seems to be kind of two things that are incongruous at first blush, but when you put them together and make it work, then it's actually a very new kind of sound.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think we're going to go ahead and take our final break at this point in time. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about technology and its role inside of American music and composition, and we'll have some more discussion about that. You're listening to the Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences weekly radio show. This week, music and American culture.
On Tuesday evenings here on WLMU, you can tune into Music City Roots, a nationally syndicated program that airs from the stage of the historic Loveless Cafe in Nashville, Tennessee. Music City Roots is recorded live and hosted by Jim Lauderdale. It features Americana, roots, rock, blues, string band, singer-songwriter, and other forms of American roots music. It's Music City Roots every Tuesday night from 6 to 7 here on WLMU.
Weekday mornings, over on our media partner, WCXZ AM 740, you can tune your radio dial to Amos in the Morning. Host Tom Amos presents news, interviews, insight, and a little music. That's Amos in the Morning, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, on WCXZ AM 740, and online at 74wcxz.com.
91.3 The Gap, WLMU, Harrogate, Tennessee.
Good afternoon. You're on the air with Dr. James McAllister. I'm the music program director at Lincoln Memorial University and filling in for Dr. Martin Sellers. This week we are doing our weekly Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences radio broadcast. We're talking about music, its role in American culture, its role in American society. We have several guests in the studio, as well as Dr. Daniel Baldwin on the phone from Nebraska, who's talking to us about a piece that he was commissioned to write for the LMU Concert Band, which is being premiered next week, Wednesday, March 8th at 7:30 p.m. Before the break, we're talking about the role of new music and composers. And Daniel, I'm curious about some technology. And I think Rachel has a question for you about technology and how it fits in terms of modern day composition.
Right. I just am remembering in the movies about the guys with the powdered wigs and whatnot, and Amadeus. It was always such a dramatic experience to watch them, madly scratching away and erasing through the paper and tearing their hair out. And I'm curious how the physical part of composing a piece for many different instruments works now, whether you do it on computer or you do it by hand, is my first question. And secondly, what is it like that first time hearing a performance performed live? I'm assuming you can listen back in some way if you're doing it on computer and kind of get a taste of it, but what's that like?
Sure, of course. Let me hit on one of the things at a time. First of all, there is still the tearing out of hair. And, hasn't changed in all the centuries of writing. I think that you could probably get any composer to confirm that for you.
Maybe that explains the wigs.
Right, I think it does explain the wigs. Yeah, I can't tell you that the composition, as far as technology is concerned, has, of course, like everything else, changed dramatically in the last few hundred years. And of course, you said you've seen Amadeus, and for all of its inaccuracies, it is accurate in that they would compose by candlelight, and they would have their quills and such that they would use, and it would be by hand on paper. All composers have different ways and methods of writing, and there's just many methods. The sky is blue. I can tell you from my perspective, there is still, and I think it's very important that composers still try to some degree use pencil and paper and sit at a piano and actually do outlines and plan out their pieces and sketch and so on and so forth. But but from there, I don't have my giant my giant orchestral or wind ensemble manuscript that I then write it out by pencil. I do use a laptop, and there is technology out there. I use a program called Finale, and then as I use sketches, I use my formal outline, and I engraved the piece from my sketch work. And
you mentioned the piano. Are most composers pianists? Are you a pianist by trade, or are you another instrumentalist or vocalist?
Well, I'm actually an instrumentalist. A lot of all people that go through music programs to the degree that Dr. McAllister and I have gone through have to have some degree of proficiency at the piano. I wouldn't want to try to put on a piano recital at any point in the near future, but I do have some degree of small amount of skill at the piano to be able to sketch and hear to a small degree what the piece might sound like, and then as I engrave it into the computer program, I am able to listen to a digitally produced playback that gives me a very dry sense of what the piece might sound like, which never. And this might start a rumble someplace in the country or on the planet, but digital musical instruments will never be able to produce the same kind of sounds as you would get by live performers. Live performers have history. They have life experiences. They have feelings, and they have the ability to interpret as individuals and as a group, guided by someone who is also interpreting and getting out of it what they get out of it from their own life experiences. So all of those personalities combined always gives a piece a fresh take that a playback never could give.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. The live performance is always going to be superior to the digital playback vis-a-vis the computer. So I think it's very important for composers to trust their inner ear and trust their knowledge of instruments, and use that as a guide rather than an absolute rule when it comes to reproduction of music. As a composer myself, that's exactly kind of the methodology that I use. I scratch things out on paper, and then I sit down at the computer and try to flesh it out as much as I can. And I think that you probably find a lot of composers doing that, but I think you'll also find a lot of composers who just do it right at the computer. And I think some of them are even, just kind of not even really worrying about the actual notation of that. They're just merely sitting down at their MIDI keyboard and just typing in music that goes into the computer, and vice versa. So I think, as Dr. Baldwin said, there are many different methodologies to making that work. Okay. Well, over the break, we had a question in the booth about your bassoon and heavy metal kind of concerto. I wonder if you would expand on that a little bit. And the question was, well, where did you ever find a bassoonist who would want to play that?
I've done two things like that. I had a performer from Indianapolis that we were trying to. He wanted to use some of his equipment. While nothing will ever beat, in my opinion, live music, there are some very cool digitally reproduced sounds, and he wanted to take advantage of that. So the instrument actually was contrabassoon, and so I had to decide overdubbing contrabassoon on top of itself. What kind of music would that best fit? And of course, you overdub contrabassoon a lot of times playing low, it's going to be pretty muddy. So using Rock's equipment, I assumed that the best course of action would be to write something heavy metal that if it sounded messy, it would be fun and cool. So
would you take a second and explain to folks what a contrabassoon is? Because I think we might have some listeners out there who don't exactly know what you're talking about.
Oh, sure. Of course, I don't know if you're familiar with a bassoon. Bassoon is a long, straight instrument made of wood that plays by two reeds vibrating together. It's approximately in the baritone range, I would say, and there is a relative of the bassoon, the contrabassoon. It's a distant relative of the contrabassoon, but it's the closest thing that resembles would be a bassoon. It also plays by two large reeds slapping back and forth together. It's a fun shape that I'm not sure that I would even want to try to describe to you online. If you have a moment, go online and Google contrabassoon and get all of the pictures. There's all kinds of fun pictures online. But it is the lowest instrument in the orchestra. It even goes lower than double bass if the double bass doesn't have an extension.
Right, and there's a famous sequence in the Ducal, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where the contrabassoon is forgive me for the term squawking, but it's squawking down there in that very low register. Yes, and
one of the reasons why that I've written so much music for that instrument is because that seems to have become the status quo for that instrument, is that it has become grotesque or humorous in whatever that it plays. So I actually am finishing up a CD of my music for contrabassoon in an effort to flatter the instrument and bring a little bit more light to the fact that it can actually play musically.
And that actually is another good reason to commission music for various instruments. Myself being a saxophonist, I mean, our literature begins in the 1850s, essentially. And so we've had to commission composers to write for the instrument just to expand the literature. So another rationale that musicians have for commissioning composers is to expand the repertoire for their instrument.
Right, exactly. And in the case of the contrabassoon, at least the solo repertoire, from my understanding, starts even later than that. There's very little music, if any music, before the 20th century. Of course, the bassoonist would know better than me, but the majority of what's played seems to be from the 20th century and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd like to thank Dr. Baldwin for calling in and spending some time with us this afternoon. I want to take a second and plug this concert that's coming up next week, Wednesday, March 8th, 7:30 p.m. in our Duke Hall in the Sam and Sue Mars Performing Arts Center. Here on the campus of Lincoln Memorial University, we're going to have our LMU Jazz Ensemble and our LMU Concert Band, and we're going to be performing 2 world premieres, which is kind of a big deal because I think that for LMU anyway, this is kind of a first, and hopefully the first of many types of projects like this where we're commissioning composers and performing, premiering new works. So if you're interested in hearing this piece that Daniel Baldwin has written called Flying, which is in honor of Mark McGinley, if you're interested in hearing my piece, Concertino for Piano and Winds, that we're performing, we're also performing 4 other standard wood band repertoire pieces as well. I'd invite you to come out to our concert, 7:30 p.m. It's a free concert, open to the public.
And Dr. Baldwin, since you're going to be there, we're going to see for ourselves that pulling the hair out thing. We want to see that firsthand. That's what we're all going to be looking for when you come out on stage.
So you're advocating some kind of rulers then?
Right. You'll see where the missing hair is. That's for sure. I'd love to plug one thing really quickly before we sign off, and that is none of them. You can't go anywhere on Earth without hearing music almost, and more and more we are cutting funding to music in academia and in professional music. There's even something out right now where the current administration is considering cutting funding to the NEA, and we already don't fund the arts enough. We literally our neighbors to the north have about a tenth of our population, and they spend 8 times more on the arts than we do. I would encourage anyone that enjoys music and the arts to get involved, contact your representatives, donate money, get them to not only do less, but try to do more to support the arts, or else the arts are going to go away. And that's something that we just can't have happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'd like to echo Dr. Baldwin's sentiments about that. It's so important that we fund the arts, and it's so important that we fund music and theater and literature and the visual arts. Because if we're not, the very core of our school is the Arts and Humanities School, and at the very core of that is the word human, because we are all trying to express ourselves, and we're trying to figure out ways to communicate, and we're trying to figure out ways to express the feelings that we have inside. So it's important for us to become very much partisan, very much advocates and supporters of the arts. So I would encourage anybody listening to this radio program to make sure that their voice is heard on that subject. This has been a great discussion. I'd like to thank our InStudio guests, Rachel Schott, Alex Bangler, Dr. Baldwin, of course, Gary Daniels. Every time I'm here, you have such great bump music coming back and forth, and I appreciate that so much. I'd like to thank you for listening, taking the time to listen to this broadcast. Again, this is Dr. James McAllister. I'm the Music Program Director at Lincoln Memorial University, representing the Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences School. Thank you for listening.
And support for today's program is made possible by Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. Further information on academics, campus life, educational programs, admissions, financial aid, and much more, www.lmunet.edu. This afternoon's program was produced by Dr. Martin Sellers. Our technical producer is Gary Daniels. Our student production assistant is John Hobbs. Our program director is Clay Stanifer, and our executive producer is Adam Haley. Our theme music is White Horses, as performed by Tierra Negra and Muriel Anderson. American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at LMU will rebroadcast again this Saturday at 10 a.m., Sunday at 8 p.m., and next Tuesday at 7 a.m. This has been a WLMU radio production.